Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. I keep a list taped inside the pantry door. Same spot, folded over the edge of an old takeout menu, right where my eye goes first when I open it. I rewrite it every morning, partly because it's the only routine left that still feels like something close to control. 2 dented cans of beans, 1 can of peaches, half a bag of rice that smells a little stale but still cooks up fine if you soak it long enough, 3 pouches of powdered drink mix, 7 candles, short ones, all burned down some, 1 rechargeable battery pack sitting at maybe 30%. That's the full inventory as of today. It's not much, but it's a list. Lists keep your head clear. The kitchen stays dark most of the day. I peel back the curtain just enough to look at the street. Cermak Road has gone dead silent since the 4th or 5th week. No sirens anymore, no engines, no one yelling. Just a plastic bag snagging its way along the curb until it catches on a mailbox and stays there. Sarah's at the kitchen table organizing medicine we pulled from a closed urgent care a while back. She's sorting out aspirin into folded wax paper, taping the packets shut with electrical tape because everything loose gets lost eventually. Emma's curled up in a dining chair with her blanket over her legs, drawing rectangles and doorways on a notepad. She says she's making a map of the house. She marks escape routes with arrows. I told her that's smart, and I meant it. We've been locked in here for just under 2 months. I make a tick mark near the kitchen clock each morning, counting from the day the phones went quiet and the television stopped showing anything except a blue screen. We've only bartered 3 times in total, twice with neighbors we trust. Once with a stranger who left 2 bottles of sealed water on our porch and took a vacuum-sealed bag of rice that I slid under the door with a broom handle. Nobody spoke. That was early on, before the rules hardened. Now people know better than to talk out loud unless it's worth the risk. The infected learned just as quickly. Any noise means food. We've made ourselves silent on purpose. I used to work over on Blue Island Avenue, at Station 19. I ran engine calls, structure fires, medical assists, everything short of hazmat. That job stopped the night a warehouse roof came down on me during a 4-alarm fire, broke 3 ribs and cracked my collarbone. The department covered me, signed the medical discharge. The city sent the checks. I was supposed to heal, maybe take light duty or retire early. Then, the walking sickness started hitting the ERs. At first it was quiet. Small stories, early denials, whispers from people I still had in my phone. By the time the city knew what it was already too late to matter. At first, Sarah and I stuck to the plan. Ration the dry goods, boil all water, use gas only when necessary. We ran the stove once a day for 10 minutes, just enough to cook without pulling attention. We drained the bathtub the 2nd week and moved to bottled water, then jugs. Then mop buckets filled with bleach and sink tap. I shot the first infected 7 days in. He was our neighbor, Carlos from 2 doors down. His arm was broken and he pressed his face against the front window like he didn't recognize glass anymore. Didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't flinch, just watched movement. I tapped the glass with a hammer to get him to back off, then opened the door, stepped out, and brought the hammer down on his head. Once, then again. I didn't look away. I didn't explain it to Sarah. I didn't need to. Our first human kill happened not long after, 10 days in. Thin guy with yellow eyes and shaky hands tried to pry open the back door. Said he needed food. Claimed he wasn't sick. I didn't believe him. I saw the knife taped under his sleeve. He had a sock on his hand, probably to grab glass if he needed to punch through. Sarah stood at the hallway entrance with a flashlight aimed low at his legs. When he stepped inside and turned toward her, I came from the side with a flat shovel and swung once. He went down into the trash bins with barely a grunt. We pulled his body out into the yard, rolled it under a tarp, and dragged it near the alley. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't vengeance. It was practicality. Make it look like this house isn't worth the effort. Then the sedan showed up on a Monday, just after noon. I heard it before I saw it. Tires crunching gravel, the squeal of a loose belt. The car coasted to a stop beneath the maple tree out front, engine ticking from heat. I edged the curtain aside. Windshield was cracked all the way across. Dried blood splashed across the front passenger door. Broken glass still in the back seat window. The front bumper was dented in 2 places. The car looked like it had driven through a war zone. I told Sarah to step back, and I pointed Emma to the far side of the living room. She got low without question. I unlatched the deadbolt and kept the security chain engaged. The guy in the driver's seat leaned toward the window with both hands raised. He cranked it down halfway. It made a grinding, dry sound like broken teeth in a metal track. Then he leaned close, voice shaking. "Mike," he said. "It's me. It's Jason." I didn't speak right away. I looked at his eyes first, then his hands, then his neck and the inside of his sleeves. No bites, no bandages, no band-aids, nothing oozing or red, just dry skin, a cut behind one ear where a piece of glass had probably caught him. No smell of rot, just the stink of radiator coolant, sweat and stress. I shut the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it again. He stepped in, stumbled once, and started talking in that disorganized way people do when they're trying to explain everything at once. His body kept moving like he hadn't realized he was safe yet. He looked thinner than I remembered. Pale. His shirt hung off him like it didn't fit anymore. He hadn't shaved. I hugged him and brought him inside. Sarah set a mug of warm water on the table and didn't ask any questions. Jason kept talking in bursts. He said the barricade near Brown Deer didn't hold. His girlfriend got bit somewhere outside Glendale. Told him to keep going. She died in the back seat while they were stopped at a gas station. He said he didn't know what else to do, so he got back in the car and kept driving with the windows up and a hoodie over his head. He drove until the gas was almost gone, and the city skyline came into view. Then he found our street. I told him our parents didn't make it. We found them in their home 3 weeks ago. The front door was open, lights still on. 3 plates on the dining table. Their bodies were in the bedroom, curled together under a blanket. There was a bottle of painkillers and a basin of clean water next to the bed. Jason didn't say anything right away, just nodded slowly, ran both hands through his hair, and let his breath out like he'd already expected it. Then he told me about Sarah's parents. Their SUV was parked in the lot behind a grocery store. Doors open, keys still in the ignition. All 4 tires slashed. No sign of them anywhere. He sat with us at the table and ate 2 slices of stale bread with the last of the cold beans from the night before. Said he had a few supplies in the car, an unopened bottle of ibuprofen, a can opener, a few packets of jerky. Nothing major. Then he told me what he'd seen on the drive down. How the highways were jammed with abandoned cars, some of them burned out. Bodies in the median, some stripped of clothing, some torn apart. He said he saw a convoy of army trucks near Racine, all facing the wrong way like they turned around too late. Then he mentioned my old station, Station 19, said he passed it on his way through. The bay doors were still shut, spray-painted with a giant red X and a warning in block letters, "Infection, do not enter." Looked like someone tried to set up a medical post out front. There were old tent poles and scorched frames scattered across the driveway. Jason said he saw maybe 2 infected nearby, both in uniform. One in firefighter gear, one in a medic's coat. He asked me straight, if the station was sealed that fast, and the place inside hadn't gone to hell yet, could it still be clean? I thought about it hard. The station had cinderblock walls, reinforced bay doors, a full backup generator, and a sealed hazmat office in the back. If they sealed the place quickly, locked it down before the infected got in, then, yeah, it was possible. If only a handful of infected ever made it inside, and the rest was just a scare tactic to keep people out, that building could be one of the safest spots left in this part of the city, and it'd be full of gear. I told him we'd go in the morning. We'd scout it. No promises, no hero plans, no big speeches. Just get eyes inside. If it looked good, we'd come back for Sarah and Emma. If it didn't, we'd take whatever we could carry and disappear back into the house like nothing ever happened. Jason nodded and didn't argue. Sarah didn't push back either. She just looked at both of us, then at the bags she'd kept packed by the hallway closet, and said she'd start boiling water for coffee. Her voice was steady, her hands calm. She's better at this than I am, whether she'll admit it or not. We slept that night in shifts. Jason took first watch on the couch with the flashlight and pry bar. I dozed with one eye open near the front window. My old turnout gloves were laid out on the dining table with the pry bar, a portable radio, and the only remaining clip of ammunition I had left for the .22 rifle. The decision was already made. We were going back to Station 19. At dawn, we pushed the sedan to the corner to avoid the starter noise. The steering was mushy. The front right tire had cords showing through. Jason drove. I sat passenger and watched the street. Sarah stayed with Emma. She did not argue. She packed 2 bags in case we did not come back and set them by the front door. She taped a note next to the peephole that said 2 knocks, then 1, and she touched it with her finger twice to seal the habit. We rolled south toward Blue Island Avenue. We cut left before Damon Avenue to avoid the snarl at the interchange with Interstate 55. We passed the old silos. Black marks ran up the concrete where somebody lit something hot and fast earlier in the month. The smell of burned grain and oil sat over the channel. Jason gripped the wheel through a curve and kept the car at a crawl. We parked in a loading alley 1 block west of the station. I took out a thermal camera I had kept from my last day through a mistake that no one corrected. The battery icon was 1 bar. I held it at chest level and scanned the roofline and the front doors from the gap between buildings. The display showed a faint warm shape in the south stairwell area, and dim cooler shapes in the main bay that could have been old heat or nothing. No bright shapes in the dorms or kitchen. We crept along the sidewalk with our hands low. The station looked like a place that everyone decided was cursed. The red X across the bay doors was thick and crude and turned a clean building into a threat. The words "Infection do not enter" ran across both doors in wide streaks. Triage tent frames lay twisted in the lot. A dark stain spread on the concrete near where the triage entrance would have been. A police jacket hung on a parking meter by one sleeve. A medic bag lay open with nothing in it. One infected civilian shuffled along the curb, a half block down, with a torn shirt and shoes that made a soft slapping sound. Another infected in a paramedic uniform stood in front of a dark storefront, with one eye half closed and swayed. They turned slowly when we moved. We stopped. We waited. They lost interest because we did not give them anything to track. I knew the roof hatch had a trick. It stuck in summer and loosened in winter. I had used a paint scraper once to get it open when the hinges swelled. We climbed to the neighboring building, crossed a short gap with a ladder we found in a utility rack, and crawled to the hatch. I used the pry bar as a thin wedge and touched the seam until it gave a small sigh and cracked open. I lifted it to the first notch and listened. Nothing. No shoes on tile. No breath. Just the small slap of canvas on metal from the triage poles rubbing in the wind. We dropped inside. The air smelled like old dust, burned tent fabric, and the chemical taste left by a gas suppression discharge. That told me something. Someone hit the emergency suppressant for a fire or for a chaotic fight. That system did not leave soot. It left sharp, dry air and residue under your tongue. The station had been sealed quick. We cleared the dorms first. Bunks were messed but not shredded. Blankets lay folded at the bottom of a few beds. A deck of cards sat on a table with 3 cards held together by moisture and grit. A whiteboard listed names. 3 names were crossed out with a hard red line. That meant someone tried to keep order and then ran out of time. We moved to the kitchen. I tested the pantry door. It was chained shut, but the chain was hung on the outside and locked with a small padlock I recognized. We cut the chain with a bolt cutter from the maintenance closet. The door swung inward. Shelves lined both sides. Bottom shelf had canned goods. Top shelf had plastic jugs of drink mix and tubs of coffee and a row of large cans with labels for pasta and beans. There were boxes of meals ready to eat stacked against the back wall. A poster with allergy instructions hung on a nail. Jason stood still with his mouth open and then closed it and put his hand on the shelf and then took his hand off and wiped it on his jeans. "We do not take everything," he whispered. "We make a plan." I nodded. I told him we scanned the stairwells and the apparatus floor and the generator before anything else. I wanted to know why the thermal camera showed that warm shape in the south stairwell. We moved with our shoulders against the walls and our feet rolling heel to toe. We stopped at each door and listened. I kept my hand on the Halligan because it is the right tool when you cannot open a door, and you need to open it anyway. The south stairwell door had a metal rod wedged through the handle and tied to the railing with a ratchet strap. Something bumped the other side. The door flexed a little. We did not open it. Not yet. We tightened the strap one more click and left it. The apparatus floor brought a small wave of relief I did not let spread. No engines were left, which made sense if command evacuated and pulled the rigs. Hose towers stood straight. Large diameter hose coiled on racks looked untouched. There were foam buckets along a wall and a cart with a stack of folded hose. Lockers held coats and self-contained breathing apparatus harnesses. Most tanks read low, but 2 backups had enough for a short push if we needed it. A spare face mask sat in a sealed bag in the top of a locker with a post-it that read, "Lieutenant" in black ink. We found our first trapped infected in the boiler room alcove. He lay under a locker unit that had fallen over. One ankle was free, and he dragged it across the floor and let out a slow throat sound when he saw our shoes. We stopped out of reach. I took the pry bar and moved forward until his head came clear under the metal. I set the flat end on his temple and pressed down hard. His eyes stopped moving. I pulled the bar back and wiped it on a dirty towel. We stood for a minute and listened for any answer. Nothing came. We opened the generator room with the brass key from the wall box. The Caterpillar diesel stood clean and intact. The fuel gauge read 1/3 of a tank. The transfer switch was set to building isolated. The battery charger light was off. I closed the door and locked it again, and put the key in my pocket. We did not start anything yet. Sound is a beacon. We checked the second stairwell. Clear. We checked the showers. Clear. We checked the chief's office. The desk drawers were open. The bottom drawer had a box of spare pass tags, a few pens, and a thin envelope with old receipts. Taped under the desk was a small key with a paper tag. The tag had H2 office written on it. That door was around the corner past the gear cages. The H2 response office door had hazard tape across it and a label. The lock was a simple handle with an internal bolt. I slid the key and turned it. The door opened and the smell of plastic and dust air rolled out. Inside were spill kits, 2 Tycom suits, 2 dosimeter wands, a shelf of binders, and a rack laid out for 2 Pelican cases. The rack labels read Case A and Case B. Both slots were empty. On the whiteboard inside the office, someone had written in green marker, Case B deployed. Jason looked at me. So the red X outside means someone made this place look toxic and then left fast, but a lot of this is still clean. It means the first line went bad, and command pulled people out and locked it, I said. It does not mean the whole place is done. He looked at the door to the south stairwell. We finish it. We did it with control. We put the trash can lid on Jason's left arm with a belt through the handles to turn it into a simple shield. I set the Halligan tip through the strap and into the door handle bracket to hold 1/2 inch of steel between motion and us. The door bowed once. I pulled the strap release 1 click. The infected leaned into the gap and shoved. I let him inside the choke point and pinned his shoulder under the bar and put the spike down on the base of his skull. I did not swing. I pressed. It took effort. It ended. We checked the stairs for a second walker. Empty all the way up, and we were alone in the station. We did not cheer. We closed the door and tightened the strap, and then took it off and locked the door to use it as a normal stair. We stood in the apparatus bay with our hands on our knees and looked around, and then we moved because you do not stand still for long in a building that looks empty. We kept the red X. We kept the infection message. We sealed the bay doors from the inside. I cut ladder rails and drilled into the cinder block and set 1/2 inch bolts into anchors and mounted the rails as crossbars. We tested each bar with our full weight. The doors did not flex. We left a small wicket panel cut near the bottom of the right bay for passing a hose section or a trade item. It sat flush and locked with a handle we scavenged from a locker. I sent Jason back for Sarah and Emma. He drove the sedan with the lights off through back streets. I covered the front from the office window with the thermal camera and watched the walkway. The two infected from earlier had moved north and were gone. The sedan rolled into the alley and stopped. Sarah stepped out with the folded wagon. Emma held a stuffed rabbit under one arm and a pan of rice under the other because she did not want to spill it. We took them up the exterior stairs. We shut the hatch. We waited. We listened. Nothing. We ate the first meal inside Station 19 at the small kitchen table that had burn marks on one edge. The pasta from the big can tasted bland but safe. The powdered lemon drink tasted weak and sweet. No one spoke for a few minutes. I kept my eyes moving across the corners of the room without thinking about it. Emma looked around in a slow circle and then put her drawing on the fridge with 2 magnets. She drew 3 little rectangles inside a big one. She called it the firehouse map. After dinner, I tested the generator for 20 minutes. I ran only the hallway lights and the kitchen overhead, and 1 plug strip for radios and flashlights. I kept every exterior light off and hung black fabric over the office windows. The generator coughed twice and settled into a low, steady hum. The sound grew on me fast, and I did not like that. It means you stop hearing what you need to hear. I shut it down after everything charged. The handheld radio I powered on was a Motorola that someone left in a drawer. The battery held a charge. Sarah stood next to me and scanned slowly. Most channels were static or dead. She flipped to shortwave and rolled through the band 1 step at a time. On 7.400 megahertz, a male voice came through in a flat loop. It repeated a call sign and 2 strings of numbers and said Silo Crown. The voice sounded recorded. The words went through 3 times, and then the signal dipped and started again. I did not recognize the call sign at first. Frank did. He knocked our agreed pattern after he saw our kitchen light leak around a curtain for a second. 2 knocks, then 1. He stood in the wedge of the door with an old jacket and a knee brace. He is a retired Chicago Police Department sergeant from Bridgeport. He lives 3 doors down. He spots things. He listens. He does not waste words. He said the coordinates sounded like old city grid overlays used by some crews before the last precinct shuffle. He said the term silo crown pointed to the top rim of the Damen silos. He knew one person who used that term. He did not give a name. We made him wash his hands and arms in the apparatus sink, and then gave him a towel and a sandwich of cold pasta and a cup of lemon drink. He ate. He nodded after each swallow with a small, determined look. Then he said he had seen 2 trucks in the last week working the South Loop. He called them the runners because that is what people passing through call themselves when they raid and leave. He said these runners like to test doors and swing bats at metal and listen for movement. He said if we wanted to keep this place, we should make it look dead. I said we had already decided on that part. We would keep the red X. We would keep the messages. We would keep the exterior dirty. We would use the wicket panel for any swap. We would not open the main doors unless we were leaving as a group, and then only at dawn with a scout out front. We would talk through plans and write them down and follow the list. He said good, and then asked to stay through the night because the trucks had been active near the old rail yard. I said yes. He unrolled his knee brace and rubbed the scar with 2 fingers and breathed like it hurt, and then said nothing more about it. We slept in shifts. I lay on a bunk and watched the ceiling and counted the seconds between building pops and far insect sounds outside. The station settled around us like a big box on a quiet shelf. We heard 1 distant siren. The battery in the radio died around 3 in the morning. I left it off. I wanted the room to be honest with me. Morning came with a thin grey light through the high windows. We set up a day schedule. I wrote it on the whiteboard. Water at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Generator for 2 hours in the morning and 1 hour in the evening for charging and short cooking. Radio checks at 9 p.m. for the 7.400 megahertz loop. Stairwell check every afternoon for changes. Roof check every other day. Luis showed up on day 3. He is a mechanic from a shop near Damon and 26th. He walked with his hands out to the side and called at the wicket panel. He had a small pack and a box of bolts under one arm. He said he had seen us move, but he did not tell anyone because he wanted to join. not trade us for his own safety. We almost sent him away. Frank watched him for a minute and asked one question about carburetors. Luis answered without thinking and started to sketch with his finger on the glass. That settled it for Frank. We brought him in and set ground rules right away and asked for his hands. The rain came that afternoon. Luis rigged a gutter capture into a 275-gallon plastic tote he found behind a closed garden supply. He strapped it to a pallet and set it under the downspout and ran vinyl tubing through a filter sock into another barrel for settling. We marked bleach drops on the lid, 8 drops per gallon. I wrote it again on the whiteboard to keep it visible. We set a Sawyer filter on the kitchen counter and ran a line into glass pitchers so there was always clean water in sight. I want clean water where eyes land. It stops panic before it starts. Leah arrived 2 days later. She is an emergency nurse from Stroger Hospital. She heard the radio pulse on 7.400 megahertz and followed it down Kermack like she was following a streetcar bell. She spoke through the wicket panel and gave us a list of medical supplies and said what she could do and what she would not do. She would not clear anyone with a bite. She would not be bullied into opening a door. She would patch wounds and clean cuts and ration antibiotics. She spoke like a person who has watched too many people die while others argued. We let her in after the full wash and check. We ran our test of the fake front on day 5. We hung ripped hazard tape back across the doors. We set a battery speaker behind the right bay and loaded a loop of low-infected moans and dragged steps. We used a plug timer to trigger it near sunset. We made sure to keep the volume low enough to carry only a short distance, so it would spook anyone peeking in, but not bring a crowd from blocks away. At dusk, a pickup rolled along Blue Island Avenue and stopped. 2 men got out with bats and a shotgun that looked homemade with tape on the stock. They stood under the red X and stared up at the paint. One kicked a tire stop and laughed. The timer clicked on. The moan loop rolled out slow. The men froze. One backed away and put his bat on his shoulder. The other cursed under his breath and walked back to the truck without looking around. They left. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding, and then got annoyed at myself for not knowing I was holding it. A woman and a boy came at noon the next day. The woman held up a plastic bag with a small propane cylinder and asked for water. She did not approach the door. She stood in the open and let us see her hands. She looked at the ground when she spoke to make it less threatening. Leah passed 2 bottles through the hose chute we made from a cut 5-inch hose section. We kept the swap point clean and obvious. The woman nodded and backed away and did not ask to come inside. I liked that. I hope she did not tell anyone else what she saw. We had one scare that was nothing, and I am glad it was nothing, because it made us check our arrogance. Luis picked up a heat signature in the equipment locker on the thermal camera. It looked like a person crouched behind gear. We lined up along the wall and counted down to a clean open, and then we found a warming pipe from the boiler loop that had heated a mop bucket and a stack of rags. We laughed a little, and then washed everything again and reset the instruments because nerves make mistakes turn into legends. We had one scare that was not nothing. Leah found old blood under mats in the second stairwell and a sweatshirt jammed behind a riser. The collar had teeth marks. The sleeve was taped. She crouched and looked at the floor and then up at me. "This is where someone lied," she said. "He or she wanted to get inside triage. He or she hid the bite here and used tape and luck. I do not blame him or her. I would have thought about the same thing if my child was outside." Leah speaks plain and moves on. I respect it. The broadcast changed on the 7th night. The looped voice added new words on 7.400 megahertz. Case A lost. Case B open. Unit 12 Hawthorne needs retrieval. Silo crown at dawn. Then it cut and started again. The loop played through 3 times. Then static. Frank stood next to the radio and watched my face. He said, Unit 12 Hawthorne was a small group of firefighters who knew the old overlay map and used it for quick references. He said one of those men liked short phrases and silly names for landmarks. He said Silo Crown was exactly what it sounded like, the top ring of the Damen silos. He said the call sign was right for that crew, but one voice was wrong. He shrugged and said maybe it was a recording or a radio with the mic stuck in a shirt pocket. We went back to the H2 office and looked again. The Pelican case rack had 2 slots. The whiteboard said Case B deployed. If that was true, then Case B had been opened and used somewhere. Maybe here, or maybe outside. That left Case A. The call said, Case A lost. The words A to H2 were scribbled on a small laminated card stuck under a binder clip. That meant bring Case A back to the H2 office, not to a hospital. It was a closed loop. Keep sample control. Keep chain of custody inside the department. That was protocol. Luis charged the small beacon we found in a drawer. It fit in a mylar sleeve with a tag that matched the H2 paperwork. The light pulsed when we plugged it into a wall brick during our generator window. It had a pairing instruction for the handheld radios to use direct mode. If there was a second beacon in Case A, someone could lead us to it, or we could lead them here. We held a short meeting at the kitchen table with the floor plan in front of us. Emma sat on my lap and colored the station with a red line for the doors, and a blue line for the tunnel and a green dot for the kitchen. She listened and chewed her lip and then set the crayon down and asked if the top of the silos had ladders. I said yes, and also broken steps, and also rust. She nodded as if that told her everything she needed to know. I drew the route on paper. We would leave at first light. We would move south on Darman Avenue. We would cut over the rail spur through the yard. We would cross to the silo yard and go up if it looked safe. If the runners were there, we would wait and keep eyes on them and not play hero. Sarah and Leah would hold the station with Frank and Emma. Luis would set the air horn on the roof with a pull string. 1 long blast meant evacuate the rear tunnel. 3 short blasts meant all hands defend inside. Before we ran the silo line, I wanted to test the rear tunnel. The station had an emergency egress toward the drainage canal. It was a service conduit used once for a training trick. Half the city did not know it existed. We pried the hatch behind the boiler room and slid into the dark. The tunnel was low and tight and smelled like old water and wet dust. Parts were collapsed. We crawled. Jason pulled with his elbows and pushed with his toes and grunted. I carried the bag and set it forward, and then pulled my body up to it and set it forward again. Rats scattered ahead of us. 1 small bone pile lay under a dripping pipe. Farther on, a piece of rebar stuck from concrete like a spike. We moved slow around it. Jason scraped his belt on it and winced. At the far end, we reached a grate that looked out near the canal. We could push it open if we had to. We marked 2 stones with chalk and set a small ammo box inside a niche with a radio, 2 batteries, 2 masks, and a note to our future selves with directions in case memory went wrong on a bad day. Back at the station, we washed up with a bucket and a rag because we did not want to run the water just for our own comfort. Leah set a small fan to dry the tunnel clothes. Emma laughed at our dirty faces. Sarah smiled, and then went to the whiteboard and added a line under the schedule that read, "Second exit good." That felt real. We left for the silos the next morning. Dawn was pale and flat. The street lay quiet except for 1 paper cup skimming along the curb. We moved on foot because engine noise is a magnet. I carried the Halligan and the pry bar. Jason carried a bag and a coil of line. We kept a radio on a lanyard inside our shirts. We stepped around broken glass and iron spikes sticking from old posts. We stayed low along the building faces. We paused at the rail yard for a long time. A small herd of undead drifted along the fence line toward a pile of pallets. 1 wore a soldier's jacket. 1 wore a grocery store vest. They moved slow and turned only when a new noise came or a shadow passed. We let them slide by and then moved under couplers and across a service path, and held still when a pigeon took off with a flurry that felt huge, only because our ears expected quiet. At the silo yard, the ground showed burns. The inside stairs were gone in sections. An exterior maintenance ladder ran up a tower to a catwalk. Jason climbed first and kept 3 points of contact. I held the line and kept my eyes on each rung. Rust flaked and smeared orange on his palms. He reached the catwalk and waved me up. I climbed. 2 panels on the catwalk were missing. We secured a line to a bolt and I tossed it across and bridged the gap with the halligan set sideways as a handhold while my feet found corner edges. No moves for show, slow and clean. The top of the silo showed soot around the rim. A pelican case sat near the rail with B stenciled on it. It was open and empty. The foam cutouts inside showed the shapes of what it once held. There was a laminated card with Unit 12 Hawthorne written on it, and a grease pencil map of the area with arrows. Taped under the metal rail was a rolled mylar pouch. Jason peeled the tape slow and handed me the pouch. Inside was a narrow radio beacon with a dead battery and a coded tag that read A2H2. We heard voices below. 3 men at the base of the ladder. A white pickup sat by the broken fence. The hood dent matched what Frank had described. 2 men had bats. One had a short shotgun made from pipe and hate. He shouted up at us and told us to hand down the case. He said he wanted the medical. He waved the shotgun. His hands shook more than his voice. I do not like those odds because a shaking hand fires wrong. We did not argue. I kicked the ladder once, hard, near the top rung where the bolts were mostly rust. The ladder twisted and leaned away from the concrete and then peeled off and fell with a slow scrape and a slam. The men jumped back. The one with the pipe shotgun stumbled. The truck backed up 2 feet on instinct. Now we had a quiet standoff. We moved sideways along the crown to a second catwalk. This one had rungs that held better. We clipped the line to a bolt and lowered ourselves to a lower level, and then to a lip, and then to a concrete roof of an adjoining silo. It felt solid. We stayed on our bellies and moved to a vent stack with a cracked ladder. We climbed down slowly into a dark indoor shaft and then through a grain chute that ended in a warehouse shell. We crouched near a gap in the wall and watched the pickup idle at the perimeter. The men argued. One pointed up, one pointed along the fence. The truck rolled forward and then stopped, and then rolled back. We used that noise to slip into the shadows of the building across the street and cut north. We kept the same slow pace all the way home. At the second-story slats near the office window, I saw the pickup again turn onto Blue Island Avenue and crawl past the station. The men looked at the red X and the infection message and did not get out. The moan speaker was off because it was morning. The men still did not approach. Maybe the ladder trick unsettled them. We sat in the dark and watched them until they were gone. We set the mylar pouch in the H2 office and plugged the beacon in and saw the pulse. We placed it under the desk if someone came through by accident. We logged the time and the action on the whiteboard. Frank wrote down the pickup plate letters on a notepad and underlined the middle one twice. He thinks like a cop, even when he says he is done being a cop. The next afternoon, we walked Canalport Riverwalk, where Frank remembered a rumor from a mobile clinic that left Harrison Park early in the outbreak. We found a white panel van nose down near a dock with the back doors open. Inside was wrecked and picked clean. Floating in a corner was a piece of grey foam with cutouts that matched a small vial and a handheld instrument. The foam had A sharpied on the edge. Case A had been here. The contents were not. A shape moved on a catwalk above us. A man lifted one hand with his palm out and held it there. He wore a jacket with an old station patch I recognized. It was Unit 12 Hawthorne. He tapped the rail with his knuckles twice and pointed to a cabinet under the dock, and then walked away without a word. He moved like someone who had practiced leaving no extra motion behind. We checked the cabinet after we listened and checked again. Inside were 2 small vials taped in a metal tin and a paper log. The log listed fever cases at Station 19 during the first week. The last page had 4 words. Bring this to H2. We brought the vials back and did not show them to anyone except Leah and Frank and Sarah. We locked one in a tin behind the breaker panel and one in the desk safe in H2. We did not think about using them because that was not the point. The point was proof. Early cases. A record that triage tried and failed and tried again and then ran out of time. The trucks circled our block that evening. They banged on a door across the street and shouted about food and medicine. We sat quiet. The moan speaker stayed off because I did not want to bring a herd with a sound at the wrong moment. The men moved on. I waited 3 minutes after their engine sound dropped off, and then stood up. My legs were stiff. I stretched. I did not like the shake in my hands, so I found a rag and wiped the table to give my hands a job. We made a board for decisions. We wrote temporary on one side and permanent on the other. I filled in a table under temporary. Second exit ready. Check. Water for 14 days. Not yet. Radar deterrent tested twice. 1 pass so far. Neighbor truce. Partial. Radio fallback if power dies. Yes, if the beacon holds and the handhelds charge. We would not commit to permanent until all squares were green. Sarah pointed to the water line and said we could add another tote. Luis said he could build a rain diverter and add a sand bed to settle grit. Leah said we needed more soap, more bleach, and more gloves. Frank said he wanted to talk to 2 neighbors who had kept quiet and seemed steady. He wrote their names on a small piece of paper and stuck it in his pocket. Emma drew a line from the kitchen to the H2 office and added a little heart. I did not comment because I did not want to turn it into a big thing. We kept checking the radio every night at 9 p.m. The loop on 7.400 MHz kept repeating. Sometimes it clicked and cut short, like a battery dying and catching again. We said the words out loud with it so our mouths would remember. Case A lost. Case B open. Unit 12 Hawthorne needs retrieval. Silo crown at dawn. The 2 trucks came back once in the morning to test us. They slapped the bay doors and shouted that we were hoarding. They used a loudhailer and called us cowards. We made no sound. We did not answer. We let the red X speak. They idled for a while and then left. I counted to 300 after the tail lights turned the corner, then pressed my forehead against the cool metal of the bay and let my breath slow down. 2 neighbors came at dusk 3 days later and tapped a pattern on the wicket panel that Frank had taught them. 3 knocks, 2 knocks, 1 knock. I opened the small door and saw a woman named Marta and a man named Devon. They stood with hands down and backs straight. They said they had told the truckmen that the station was dead. They said they wanted to trade a small propane tank for gauze and a battery. We did the trade behind the hose chute without showing faces. Leah rolled the gauze and the bandage in a clean rag and slid it through. Luis took the propane and set it in a cage in the back corner away from the generator. We all said a quiet thank you and then closed the panel. Emma drew the silos and the ladder and the tunnel on one page. She put the pickup on the street and drew 2 stickmen with bats. She wrote mean trucks next to them. She taped the drawing to the H2 office door. I wanted to take it down because it felt like a signal if anyone got inside. But the joy on her face beat my worry. I left it. At night, I walked the station alone and listened to its noises. I walked the dorms and checked each bunk. I checked the kitchen and the pantry and the lock on the generator room. I checked the H2 office twice. I locked the door and then tugged it because you do not trust a lock just because you turned a key once. I did not pray. I counted. It works better for me. In the morning, I wrote the plan for the next week on the whiteboard. Add second tote. Test canal pump. Drill the tunnel exit 1 more time with a full pack to see if Emma can move through it without trouble. Trade schedule at the wicket panel Mondays and Thursdays only. Radio watch every night at 9 p.m. in pairs. I told Sarah that if the runners came through the doors, we would not hesitate. We would not warn. We would not make a speech about fairness or need. We would act and then finish acting. She put her hand on the table and looked at me and nodded one time. We did not need more than that. We geared up for another short run to the canal to test the pump. Luis strapped the small Honda pump to a dolly and ran a hose to the canal edge and a line back to a barrel for flushing water. The water came up cloudy and green and settled to a darker layer. We marked the barrel with tape that said flushing only. We wrote it in large letters on the lid. Emma watched with her face serious and asked if she could paint the letters to make them thicker. Sarah handed her a brush. She made slow strokes and did not make a mess. On the way back from the canal, we heard a noise across the bridge and saw a group of infected drifting along the river path. One had a bent arm that dragged. One wore a yellow rain jacket. They did not see us because we kept low and moved behind a dumpster. Jason gripped my sleeve and pointed to the far end, where a person in a hoodie stood with a hand on a rail. The person did not move much. Then the person slid away into a doorway without a sound. Maybe the same Unit 12 Hawthorne man. Maybe a ghost of our own nerves. I choose the first because it keeps my head straight. When we got back, Sarah had the station quiet, and Emma asleep on the bunk with the stuffed rabbit under her arm. Leah sat at the table with a list and a pen. She pointed to the yes column. Soap, bleach, clean water, gauze. She pointed to the no column. Antibiotics low, gloves low, battery stock shallow. She said this like a doctor reading a chart. I thanked her. We do what we can with what we have. That night on 7.400 megahertz, the loop stuttered and then cleared. The words cut clean. Case A lost. Case B open. Unit 12. Hawthorne needs retrieval. Silo crown at dawn. The voice sounded close for a moment, like he had moved nearer to the mic. Frank looked at the ceiling and rubbed his jaw and said, "He is still out there." I lay awake and counted the beams in the ceiling. I traced the route in my head from the station to the silos to the cabinet to the van and back to the H2 office. I pictured the pelican case on the roof and the empty foam. I pictured the tin with the vials. I pictured the men with the bats and the shotgun. My mind did not wander. It moved each item into a box. It felt like rest to me. We are going to hold this station. We are going to make it work as a shelter and a workshop and a quiet radio in a loud city. We will not paint it clean. We will not fix the front. We will not tell anyone more than they need to know. We will keep the red X on the bay and the ugly stencils across the doors. We will make it look dead while we keep it alive. I can feel what this place can be. A quiet center, a storeroom that does not leak, a kitchen where a child can draw while the adults plan the next step. I am not asking for a future, I am asking for next week. That is what I tell myself when the radio clicks and the loop starts again, and I wonder if anyone is hearing us in return. We will move on the second exit in the morning and stage a cache at the tunnel mouth with more water and a flare. We will build a trade slot with a sliding plate so we can pass larger items without breaking our own rule. We will plan another short move to Harrison Park to follow the thread from the mobile clinic. Frank wants to ask around Bridgeport for a man who used the term silo crown before the outbreak. He thinks he can find a last name. I set the whiteboard in the kitchen to show the sequence hour by hour. Breakfast at 7 a.m. Tools checked at 7:30. Tunnel cache, move at 8. Trade slot fabrication at 10. Harrison Park recon window at noon if weather holds and the street stays quiet. Frank's Bridgeport search at the same time in the opposite direction. Radios on a 2-hour heartbeat call. If one team misses 2 check-ins in a row, the other team does not go to rescue. The other team locks down and waits for night. No exceptions. Emma watches me write and asks for the dry erase marker when I finish. She draws a short blue line from the kitchen to the boiler room and a small star at the tunnel hatch. She adds a little arrow that shows the turn where the rebar sits like a hook. She writes hook so no one forgets. I kiss the top of her head and tell her she did good. We carry 2 plastic jugs of water and a small metal ammo tin down the boiler room steps. The air down here always tastes like old brick and wet dust. Luis heads first with a headlamp. He checks the joints, knocks once on the wall near the collar with the hairline crack, then slides through the hatch. I pass the jugs. Jason follows with a coil of rope, 2 road flares, and the radio wrapped in a towel to keep it dry. I bring the pry bar and the Halligan. The tunnel eats our noise and spits it back as small clicks. We pause at the rebar hook and shift packs to the right. The rats announce us and then scatter. At the grate near the canal, we wedge the ammo tin behind the 3rd brick from the corner. Inside the tin sit 2 small batteries, the handheld radio, a roll of tape, and a folded plastic sheet. I write in thick marker on the inside lid. If we run, meet at the orange drain pipe. I lay the road flare on top with a rubber band around it. We stand there in the low light and stare through the grate at grey water sliding past. It feels like a drawbridge that opens only once a week. Jason crouches and looks back through the tunnel and says he smells something sweet. Luis turns his head and inhales and says it is the canal. Someone spilled something upstream. He points at a thin film on the surface and says, "Do not draft from here for drinking unless we boil it twice." We add a second piece of tape to the barrel lid back upstairs, that says flushing only in thicker letters. Back in the bay, we lay out parts for the trade slot. Luis pulls a steel baking sheet from the kitchen and laughs and says the firehouse owes the kitchen one. He cuts a rectangle out of the lower panel on the right bay door. The hole is just big enough to pass a propane tank or a small toolbox. He mounts 2 angle rails inside and sets the baking sheet on them as a sliding door. He drills a handle through one end and sets a lock post on the inside so the plate cannot be jimmied from the alley. Then he runs a rubber gasket around the edges so the plate does not rattle and betray us at night. We push a crate through to test it and pull it back in smooth. It works. Sarah writes the new rule on the whiteboard. Trade slot open Mondays and Thursdays between noon and 1 p.m. All trades through the slot, no face-to-face. If a voice at the door makes a scene, the slot stays shut. If anyone touches the lock, the slot stays shut forever. Frank stands at the table with a map spread and taps Bridgeport with his finger. He names 2 people he trusts enough to risk a short walk. Marta knows one of them. That helps. He puts an old badge in his pocket and says it is not to flash. It is to remind him to keep his back straight. He checks his knee brace and laughs when the strap squeaks, then rubs a little dish soap on it. It goes quiet. He takes a water bottle and a small roll of gauze. Leah hands him 2 adhesive strips and tells him to use them if his heel rubs raw. He says, "Yes, ma'am," and grins, and steps out with the careful walk of an older man who still knows exactly where his feet go. We step off for Harrison Park near noon. Luis stays behind the wicket panel. Leah stays inside with Emma. Sarah stands watch at the second-floor window with the thermal camera. Jason and I move down Damon and cut east across 21st Place. The street is silent except for little grit rolling in seams. I keep the Halligan low and the pry bar tucked against my thigh. We speak only when we need to. Short words. Harrison Park looks like a place where people waited for help and got silence. The fieldhouse door hangs open. A signboard leans against a light pole with faded letters that once said triage. The tops of 2 tents still stand like ribs. Plastic chairs lie upside down. On the north side of the fieldhouse sits a stack of plastic bins. We do not rush them. We walk the perimeter. We look under the bins with a mirror taped to a stick. No hands, no feet, no breath. We stand still and listen before we lift the lid on one. Inside the first bin are empty biohazard bags. Inside the second are cloth strips once used as armbands. Inside the third is a clipboard with a wet corner and pages that stuck. The writing lists temperatures and names with first letters only. There is a note in the margin that says sample A to H2. There is a second note that says van to Canalport. I trace the route with my finger in the air to put it in my head. We hear a noise from the gym, short, not an echo. We look at each other and move to the door with our backs to the wall. I check the hinge side and then the handle side. Jason loosens 2 screws and eases the latch out so it does not squeal. We push in slow. The gym smells like bleach and old sweat and the faint bite of burned nylon. There are 3 cots and a pile of blankets and a line of empty water bottles. A soccer goal leaned against the wall slides and falls with a bang. That was the sound. Nothing else moves. We wait 2 minutes anyway because nerves lie. We check the office. There is a couch and a coffee maker and a small fridge with black mold on the rubber lip. There is a corkboard with a map of the neighborhood and a circle around the silos with the word Crown underlined. There are initials next to a number that looks like a radio frequency. 7.400 megahertz, same as our loop. I take the push pins and slide the map off the wall and roll it tight and tuck it into my pack. We leave the gym and keep moving because we are not here to camp. Outside, 2 infected move along the far fence. One wears a white kitchen coat. One wears a Chicago Fire soccer jersey. They do not see us. We cut back out and take the alley to the west side. A cat stares at us from under a car seat and then scurries away. Jason points at a stack of pallets and we check behind them for a hidden body or a bag. Nothing. We do a last slow look at the field and then go. On the way back, we pass a house with smoke coming from a second-floor window. It is not a big column. It is slow and brown. An old couch is propped in the door like a bad barricade. I can hear the small pop of wood once in a while. Jason looks at me and waits. He knows what is in my head without me telling him. I count to 10 in my head. We do not have an engine. We do not have a pump with any head pressure worth much. We do not have 4 backup bodies for a fast knockdown. We have 2 people and a pry bar and a line that would run dry in 2 minutes. A woman screams from the second floor and throws a wet towel at the glass. It hits and sticks. Then it slides. She coughs hard. I make a choice that I do not have the right to judge later. We go to the side door. I wedge the Halligan at the latch and pop it. We crouch and stay low. The stairwell is bright with smoke. I cannot see the source of the fire, which means it is either in a back room or under the floor. I keep one hand on the rail and one on the Halligan and shout for her to come to my voice. She stumbles into view at the top of the stairs, bent over and wiping her eyes. I pull her down by the wrist. Jason takes her under the other arm. We get her out in under a minute. We do not go back for anything else. She clings to Jason and gasps for air. When she can speak, she points to the second floor and says a name, and then coughs again. She says the name again and starts up the steps, and I pull her back. I do not pretend. I do not lie. I tell her the floor above is a trap, and the room is burning, and if the person has not come out, he or she is gone. She hits my shoulder with a weak fist and falls to her knees, and then sits on the curb and stares at the door with a flat face and no sound. Jason stands next to her and breathes hard, and then looks away. We leave 2 water bottles and a blanket and walk. I hate this part of me, and I will still do it again when the choice is the same. Back at the station, Frank is waiting in the kitchen with a look that says he found a thread. He set a piece of paper on the table with the name Pete Moreno, former Ladder 12. He knew the word crown for the silo tops because he used to call the top of any grain tower the crown when he worked tandem rescues, before the department told him to stop using slang on air. Frank says Pete switched to a small volunteer group right before the outbreak and worked at a church pantry near Halstead. The pantry is shut now. Frank talked to a man who said Pete was alive 3 days ago and was walking with a limp. Leah shows us the clipboard we grabbed. She taps the part that says Sample A to H2. She says this is proof that early on, someone tested fever cases and tried to hold the line inside the department without sending anything to hospitals. She says that approach kept the focus clean. She says this like a person who has lived inside exhausted rooms and knows that too many hands ruin a good plan. I agree. The radio at 9 p.m. gives us the same loop. The voice has a drag in the middle now. The words hitch between case A lost and case B open. I wonder if the battery that runs that loop is dying. I wonder if the person who set it is sleeping somewhere near the silos, counting to 100 with each breath to keep his head from splitting. I stare at the radio for a long time after the loop ends and the static stays. Rain starts near midnight. It hits the roof in a steady patter and then picks up. Luis goes to the gutter capture with a poncho and checks the diverter. He calls out numbers as the tote level rises, and I write them down. The downspout clogs once, and he clears it with a stick and a curse, and then laughs at himself because he did not need the curse to make the stick move. The tote gets to a safe line, then we cap it. We sleep with the sound of water in the barrel, and Emma sleeps with a smile because she can hear the sound, and it means baths tomorrow even if they are short. Morning brings a visitor at the wicket panel. Marta taps the pattern and speaks through the slot. She says the trucks asked 3 doors down about the station again. She told them she saw an infected under the bay window. She told them she heard a cough at night and not a generator. She keeps up the lie without being asked, and I know that means she has made her own calculation about the value of a strong neighbor a block away. We give her 2 bars of soap, a small bag of rice, and a return promise for a propane refill when we get the parts to adapt the valve. She smiles and blows a small kiss to Emma and walks back with steady steps. We split again. Frank wants to try to find Pete. Leah says go, but do not bring him inside until he is checked and calm. Frank says yes, and pats his pocket for the badge and his knee brace and steps out toward Halstead. Jason and I plan to walk to the Canalport dock cabinet again and comb the area on the opposite bank. Sarah and Leah keep station watch with Luis. Emma sits with a coloring book and hums to herself. She has started to draw little clocks next to her maps. She numbers them and sticks them on the fridge. It makes sense to her. It makes sense to me too. The canal port walk is quiet until it is not. We reach the dock and see fresh footprints in the mud. 3 sets. One boot tread is wide and has a gouge in the heel that leaves a crescent mark. The white panel van is still nose down. The cabinet we opened last time sits closed again, with a piece of wire through the handle. I look for glass on the ground from a bottle broken recently and do not see any. I kneel and touch the cabinet with the back of my fingers. Cool. No human heat on it in a while. We cut the wire and open it and find nothing new inside. A voice from the catwalk above says my name. It is a man's voice, and it is said quiet like a greeting at a funeral. I look up and see the jacket with the unit patch. The man lifts one hand and points to the north along the river. He taps the rail and holds up 2 fingers and then points at the truck yard not far from the silos. Then he is gone again. He moves like a person who has done surveillance for a living. Jason looks at me with eyebrows high. I roll my hand and we move. We reach the edge of the truck yard and crouch behind a rusting trailer. The white pickup from before sits near the gate with the hood up. 2 men stand by the tailgate and argue with their faces close. A 3rd man stands near a stack of tires, with the pipe shotgun resting on his shoulder. He looks bored and hungry. A 4th man I have not seen before has a radio pressed to his mouth and looks at the silos. The radio hisses. I can pick out single words. Crown, ladder, 3rd shift. He brings the radio down and shakes his head and kicks a tire. We do not attack. We do not reveal ourselves. We watch for 5 minutes. The radio man points at the pickup and then at the silos, and then at the general direction of our station. The men get in the truck and roll out slow. They pass within 50 feet of our trailer. The bored man scratches his cheek and yawns, and I see that he has tape on his finger where a blister opened. He is not a soldier. He is a man who wants a sure thing. I do not let myself hate him because that is a waste. I keep his face in my head because I will need it later. On the way back we hear the air horn, not the long blast. 3 short blasts. All hands defend. We move to a trot and then to a run. We do not break into a sprint because a sprint burns your eyes and your ears and makes you stupid. We keep our feet under us and our heads up. We cut through the alley and I see the station doors and the small shape of Emma in the 2nd floor window. She flashes a light twice. Good. That is the all clear for us. Lewis meets us at the wicket panel and speaks fast. The trucks came. The men had crowbars and a sledge. They worked the right bay where the sliding plate sits. Leah hit the moan loop and the men laughed and kept hitting. Sarah waited with the air horn line in her hand and counted. When they hit the lock post, she pulled the line once for the first short blast. Frank's rule, 1 blast for alert, 2 more blasts as they hit again and again. Luis fired a dry chemical extinguisher through the slot. The white powder blinded the men and made them cough. The men backed away and cursed. They threw 1 small bottle on a rag at the base of the door and lit it. We move without speaking. Jason goes to the generator room. I go to the kitchen and grab the 2 largest wool blankets and dunk them in the sink with a splash of bleach. Luis sets a wedge at the base of the door to keep the burning rag from rolling inward. The flame licks the seam and sputters. The smoke pushes under the edge for a second and then slows because the gap is small. We throw the wet blankets down at the seam and press with a boot. The flame dies, and a thin line of smoke slides up the door and disappears. Jason starts the generator for 1 minute to power the hallway fan. He points it at the bay seam to draw any smoke outward. Then he kills the juice. We do not give our position away with a long hum. The men outside shout and kick and then go quiet. We stand still and listen. After a minute or 2, we hear the pickup grind and move. Leah counts to 60 with her fingers and then counts to 60 again. She shakes her head and smiles a little that is not joy. She just likes when a plan works and nobody died. We sit Emma on a chair at the far end of the kitchen and tell her she did good with the light. She asks if she can draw the blankets on her map. Sarah says yes and hands her a blue crayon for water and a grey for smoke. Emma draws 2 rectangles by the bay and writes wet so no one can forget what those shapes mean if the paper outlives us. We do not give the trucks time to circle back. We tighten the lock post on the sliding plate. We add 2 more bolts through the inner frame. Luis sets a thin sheet of metal behind the gap to act as a spark shield if someone gets creative with fire again. I take one of the old long ladders and run it horizontally across the inside of the bay as a third crossbar and set it on 2 hooks bolted into the masonry. Now the door looks like a ribcage from the inside. Frank returns from Halstead near dusk with a man who leans hard on a broom handle. It is Pete Moreno. He looks like a person who slept in a stairwell for a week. He has a limp and a cut on his cheek and the eyes of someone who has seen 30 bodies in one day and can still list the order in which he saw them. We do not bring him inside right away. Leah holds up a hand. Pete laughs and says, "Fair." He rolls up his sleeves. No bites. He lets Leah check his legs. No bites. Leah gives him soap and a bucket and waits while he washes. She checks again. Clear. We bring him in and set him by the table with a cup of warm drink. Pete talks in short lines. He says, Unit 12 set the loop on the crown because ground level was not safe. He says Case B was used on a cluster at the field house near Harrison Park. He says the clinic van tried to move Case A but got blocked by a crash on Canalport. He says he left the tin in the dock cabinet because he knew the water line would keep the cabinet cool and hidden. He says the runners watched him once, and he had to stay in a stairwell for an entire day breathing through his shirt to keep quiet until they left. He says the loop is on a small sealed battery and will die soon. I ask him why the words A to H2 were repeated so often. He says because hospitals lost the plot. He says the department wanted a chain of custody for early samples and wanted to avoid panic at large centers. He says the H2 office in this station was supposed to hold the log and vials until someone with a badge and a number picked them up. He says no one came. I tell him 1 vial is behind the breaker panel and 1 is in the H2 safe. He smiles and closes his eyes and nods. He says, "Do not bring either to a hospital." I say we will not. We give Pete a bunk. He sleeps with his boots near his head and his jacket under his shoulders and his broom handle within reach. He snores a little and then stops and then snores again. Frank sits in the chair by the door and keeps one eye on the hall, with the calm of a man who spent 20 years in a squad car and knows how to talk himself out of a bad hunch. I lie on the bunk across from Pete and do not sleep because my head is busy. Then I sleep without meaning to and wake up with the light in my face. Rain pounds the roof just before dawn. Luis yells from the utility room that the gutter overflowed. I pull on my boots and we run to the tote. The downspout is clogged with leaves and a plastic strip. Luis clears it with a rod and we hear the whoosh of water again. The tote climbs to the line and we cap it. Water for 14 days looks real if we do not shower like fools. We eat hot oats for breakfast. Emma pours a spoon of sugar on hers and smiles like she found candy. Sarah lets her keep it because the last 24 hours were heavy. Leah adds a pinch of salt to hers and nods once. Pete eats slow and holds the bowl low like a person on a cold night. He says, "Thank you," and means it. We plan a deeper run. The trucks will not give up. The loop will die. If the trucks vanish, another crew will take their place. We need a second exit that is not a crawl for a child. The service conduit works, but it is slow. We need a clean alley door or a ladder run to a roof with a lockable hatch 2 buildings away. Luis brings out a coil of cable and a bucket of expansion anchors and says if we set a fixed line between the roof and the next building, we can clip in and slide in under 10 seconds if chased. I do not love it because lines draw eyes, but the speed difference gives me ground. We agree to do it at dusk when shadows sit long. Midday brings a short hail on the wicket panel. Not the pattern. 2 rough raps. We freeze. I stand behind the door with the pry bar. Luis crouches with the extinguisher. Sarah stands to the side with the handheld radio so her voice does not betray the door's exact position. She asks what the person wants. A man says he has medicine to trade. He says he has 4 bottles and a bag of bandages. He says he wants 2 jugs of water and a bag of rice. His voice slides on the word medicine. Leah is strict. She says, "Read the labels." The man says the labels are new. She asks for the names. He says 2 are in short brown bottles with names that do not match any painkiller. He hesitates on the second. He says the other 2 are antibiotics. He cannot pronounce them. Leah shakes her head before he finishes the last syllable. She says he has a bag of vitamins and sugar pills and a head for lying. She does not open the slot. The man swears and bangs the door. Luis flicks the spark strip with a lighter, just once, so a line of smoke drifts from the seam without heat. The man coughs and leaves. We wait 5 minutes before we speak again. Frank takes Pete back to Bridgeport to meet Marta's contact who knew him from the pantry. They move like 2 men who can read a block with one glance. Leah puts Emma on map duty to keep her focused. Sarah and I recheck the tunnel. We find fresh footprints near the grate. Not ours, smaller than mine. One shoe has a flap loose because the heel mark smears. Someone else used the canal path in the night. We push the ammo tin deeper and set the flare under a brick instead of on the shelf. We add a second note with our route to a fallback spot under the Damon Avenue Bridge, just in case. The storm that started as rain turns ugly by afternoon. The sky goes dark and the wind pushes in sheets. Water backs up in the alley and comes under the door in a thin line. We sandbag fast. Luis rolls towels and packs them in the seam. The water stops. The storm keeps roaring. The roof hatch rattles once. We tie it down with 2 lengths of paracord. A loud crack shakes the building, and then a rumble. We run to the second-floor window. The top of the old warehouse across the alley slumps inward. A plume of dust rolls out of a broken seam, and then stops. The wind throws rain at the side of the station in sheets. I watch the warehouse for a minute and see 3 shapes move in the doorway. Not people. Undead. They stagger against the wind, and then find the alley. One stops and sniffs at the air in a mindless way. One steps into a puddle and trips and falls, and gets up in a slow motion that makes me sick. The third bumps the bay door. We stand still, and keep our breath slow so we do not fog the glass. The undead drift past. The wind hides any sound we make. The storm drops branches on the street, and one of them hits our rain diverter and knocks it loose. Luis swears under his breath and pulls on his poncho and climbs to the roof with a rope tied around his waist. I pay out the rope and brace with my feet spread. He crawls the last 4 feet on his stomach and clips the diverter back on with a bolt and a big washer. He taps it twice and I pull him back by the rope. He stands and shakes his arms and laughs in relief. We tie a second lashing to the diverter so the next gust does not strip it. Night falls early. The generator runs for only 1 hour because we do not want any hum carrying in wet air. We eat cold meals ready to eat and bread and call it good. Emma sleeps with her rabbit and a flashlight under her pillow in case she wakes and the dark eats the room. Sarah sits with me at the table and we say 3 sentences not about food or water or doors. We talk about the blue paint in the dorm that scuffs off when you touch it. We talk about wanting coffee that tastes like something other than dust. We talk about the way the rain sounds on the roof over the apparatus bay. Then we stop and sit quiet because nothing else needs to bend our heads tonight. Near midnight, the trucks return. We hear the engine before we see lights. We kill every light. We sit on the floor in the kitchen with our backs against the cabinets. The men laugh and shout outside. Footsteps splash in the alley. The loudhailer cracks once and then fails because the rain got into it. A bat hits the bay with a hollow thump, another thump, a scrape, then a deeper sound, a push bar. They brought a jack. Frank takes position at the interior ladder crossbar with a long pipe and a wrench. If the jack bites, he will knock it clear with a sideways hit. Leah kneels with a medical bag open and a roll of bandages ready. She is not shaking. She is calm in a way that makes me feel like the room is stronger than cement. Sarah holds the air horn line in her hand. She meets my eyes and waits. I nod. She pulls once. The sharp note cuts the room and punches the door. She holds a count and pulls again. Then again. 3 shorts. All hands defend. The jack bites and pushes. The door flexes a fraction. The ladder crossbar groans. Frank slides in and hits the jack head with the pipe. The metal slips and the jack rockets to the side and punches the ground. The man outside yelps. The bat thumps stop. Silence. Then the sound of a bottle breaking. A whoosh. Fire blooms at the base of the door again. Luis slaps the extinguisher lever and sends a white stream through the seam and the slot and out the bottom. The flame coughs once and dies. We hear a second truck, a deeper engine. The first truck's driver revs and drops the clutch and tries to bump the door. The crossbars hold. The masonry sings with the hit. A second hit follows. We breathe steady. The door shakes dust into the room. Jason counts the seconds between hits so he knows if they are winding up or running out of courage. The second truck creeps forward and stops. A voice I have not heard before says, "Back it up and ram it." I do not like that sentence at all. I make a decision I have saved for the last bad minute. I send Jason to the generator and tell him to give me 2 minutes of juice. He nods. I tell Sarah to stand back. I tell Frank to get ready for a yank. I drag the large diameter hose to the rear overhead coil and clip it to the roof tank stub for gravity. I run it to the wicket slot. I set the inline nozzle and open the valve. The head pressure is not much, but it is steady. I let water sheet under the door. The alley turns slick. The first truck reverses halfway down the block, fishtails, and lines up again. The second truck stays put but blares the horn once, long and loud, as if that's going to change anything. Then, the lead truck guns it. Tires spin against pavement already slick with runoff. They hit the sheet of water we laid from the second floor barrel and lose grip. The truck slides off angle, hydroplanes, and turns too far left. The bumper scrapes the curb and misses our reinforced door by a full foot. Instead, it clips the parking meter with enough force to snap it in half. The truck rocks hard on its frame, wobbles, and stalls dead in place. Someone in the cab yells. Another voice breaks into laughter like it's all a joke. The second truck revs hard like he's about to join in, then cuts the engine. He changes his mind. We don't move. No one leans out to check. No one opens the peephole. Jason counts silently to himself, with one hand resting near the generator controls. The downpour keeps coming, flattening out against the rooftop in thick, solid waves. The men outside curse again, quieter this time, and the sound of wet boots slapping pavement tells us they're finally stepping back from their bad plan. One door slams, then another. Engines stutter, turn over, and catch. Headlights throw jagged beams through the slats of the old auto shop across the street. Both trucks roll out slow, tires hissing across wet pavement. We watch the glow recede, until it turns right onto Blue Island and disappears into the haze. Frank speaks first, 300 count, and we all say it together like a habit. When we reach the end, we finally get up. We don't call it a win. That's how people mess up. Instead, we do a gear check. Then everyone lays down where they are, in whatever clothes they're wearing. We sleep light, with one person always awake. Sarah takes the second shift. I trade with her just before 2 in the morning. She presses my hand before standing up and gives me the kind of smile that means she's tired, but not worn out. That's good enough. I sit by the stove where the pilot light used to be and let my eyes adjust to the glow of a half-burned candle in a glass jar. I watch the wick flicker and think through what we have left. 5 candles intact, 2 half-used. I might be able to melt them down, pour the wax into cleaned-out tuna cans, and make new ones if I can find more wicks. Not much, but enough to keep my head from spinning. By morning, the storm has scraped the city clean. Trash clings to fences and sewer grates. Damp branches sag over power lines. The street outside looks like someone scrubbed it with a fire hose and then forgot to rinse it all the way. I step onto the roof and scan the skyline. The Damon silos now wear a fresh streak of soot washed down from the top rim. The metal looks darker, like the storm polished away a layer. The old warehouse across the rail line smells like wet drywall and mold. The stack of lumber near the dock has shifted a foot, maybe more. One of the rotting beams collapsed under the weight. The infected we saw last night are gone. Either drifted off with the noise or followed the smell of rot somewhere else. I don't chase the metaphor. I check the air, then check the board, and start our next list. Luis rigs the roofline before sundown. He drills 2 anchors into the parapet on the northeast corner of the building and runs a heavy cable to the flat roof of the print shop next door. From street level, it's just one more wire stretched between broken buildings. but up close, it's tensioned with purpose. He sets a pulley with a basic harness, loops the return line through a climbing clip, and tests it first with a 50-pound sack of sand. It moves clean, no bounce. Then I strap in, lean back into the harness, and glide across at a slow slide. The line hums under the weight, but it holds. When I reach the other side, I anchor with a turn and haul myself back. We wrap the cable in black tape to kill the shine and throw an old tarp over the mount point so it blends into the junk heap on the roof. It's not beautiful. It's secure. That's enough. The alley is too exposed. If we ever get forced out through the front or jammed into a bad corner, the roofline gives us an option. It's not for carrying supplies. It's for the people who need to live. The first time we practiced an evac drill with Emma, she froze halfway across. Sarah talked her through it one step at a time. The second time, she made it all the way on her own. By the third run, she asked if she could do it blindfolded. We told her no, but we didn't say it to be funny. We said it like we meant it, because we did. Frank maps out the neighboring blocks over coffee that afternoon. We've started making a log of sightlines and blind spots. The station still looks abandoned from the street. The front bay is still tagged with the red X. The paint's flaking, but it only makes the whole thing more believable. I repainted the infection stencil in spots where the letters faded. We poured a little rancid mop water around the sidewalk just to give it the right smell. No one stops. That's exactly what we want. We start building out the trade slot 2 days later. Luis finds an old steel drawer slider from a workshop bench and fits it into the side wall of the maintenance entrance. It moves smooth once he greases the runners. Now we can pass larger items, jugs of water, medkits, bags of supplies, without opening the full wicket panel or unlocking anything. We bolt a sheet of metal over the slot from the inside and only slide it open when both parties are ready. The rules stay the same. No speaking, no bartering, no faces. If the other person leaves something worth taking, we take it. If not, we push it back out and wait for the next exchange. Jason finishes cleaning the beacon the same night the radio loop finally goes dead. No click, no sign-off, just static. He keeps the handheld powered on for 2 hours, just in case. Then he turns it off and sets it back on the charger. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to. If the man from Unit 12 Hawthorne is still out there, he either shut it down on purpose or didn't make it back to the mic. Either way, the silence feels heavier than the message ever did. The next week moves slow but steady. Leah sets up a small clinic space in the old chief's office. The desk drawers now hold gauze rolls, antiseptic, and her handwritten triage notes. She built it with purpose. When someone's bleeding or burning or bitten, we'll know where to take them. Emma updates her map again and adds stars for each important room: kitchen, sleeping bunks, roof cable, tunnel hatch. She writes emergency places at the top in crooked letters and underlines it twice. Sarah tapes it to the fridge next to the old calendar we never updated past April. We build a second rain catchment system on the roof using gutters from a stripped RV. It fills slower than the main tote, but it's cleaner. We boil and filter everything the same, but the confidence boost helps. Sarah smiles a little more often. Luis plays with extra cable just to keep his hands busy. Leah found 3 unopened packs of gloves in a sealed emergency kit. Last time we scouted the med van by the bridge. It's a small win, but the kind that adds weight over time. The runners never come back, or if they do, they stay in their trucks and drive past without a word. Word got out that the place is rotten, cursed, not worth it. We let the rumor do its job. Nobody wants to crack open a place filled with infected that might not be dead all the way. The fake groan tape helps. So does the blood we smeared under the handles last week, from an infected that wandered too close and got stuck on the perimeter fence. You don't waste small advantages out here. You use them. We don't pretend we're safe. This isn't a sanctuary. It's just better than anything else we've seen. The doors hold. The generator runs 1 hour each night. The water's clean. The food stretches further when you eat by the schedule. We've got nails in every window and screws in every hinge. 2 barrels of backup water in the basement. 1 radio tuned to weather channels. 3 maps with red lines and fallback points. A kid who still smiles and draws stars on walls. That's what survival looks like now. Frank says, we're not building hope, just buying time. I don't argue. I think time is what hope lives inside anyway. The more we stack the hours right, the more days we get. That's all this is. One good day stacked on top of another. A candle burned only halfway. A line tested but not crossed. A door unopened by a stranger. A child still asleep by morning. Tomorrow, we'll run another drill through the tunnel. We'll refill the reserve barrel. Luis wants to test a crank radio with a new antenna. Frank's going to map out an old precinct 2 miles west in case the silos ever become an option again. Emma asked if she can draw smiley faces on the emergency kits. Sarah said yes. I didn't say anything, but I smiled. We'll hold this place as long as it holds us. When the day comes that it doesn't, we'll take what we've learned and go somewhere else. Not because we're weak, because that's what it means to stay alive. You move when the walls stop being walls. You run before the floor turns into a trap. You survive. For now, Station 19 is still ours. And we're still here. Trying. And that's enough. That's what survival looks like now. Not clean. Not perfect. But real. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the stories alive. For now, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and stay alive. Jack's Nightmares, signing off. Until next time, survivor.